We are bang on 12, so let's go and start. So welcome everyone, thanks for joining. We're going to be, of course, talking about deploying static websites to Azure the cheap and performant way. So hopefully you're in the right place before we start off. Just some quick introductions. My name is Chris Reddington. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft by day. That's the day job. Obviously we're all here, community-driven event. I do a lot of work with the community as well. So if you're interested in following anything I do, cloudwithchris.com, Twitter, GitHub, YouTube details all on there as well. And I'll put this one right up front if you want to go and capture this one, just some useful takeaway stuff for afterwards. So some modules on Microsoft Learn, QR code is there for easy use, and that link takes you to the exact same page as well. So I've got it here, got it to go on the end again, so make sure this is only the start of your journey with Static Web Apps. And of course, big thank you to the sponsors who, of course, this wouldn't be possible without, so big thank you to those. So, first off, why Static Web Apps? What are static Web Apps? So, I just want to set the scene, set the context and the tone a moment, just in case we may be in different places. So just out of curiosity, who has built a static website before? Who knows what a definition of a static website would be? Who's heard of something called Jamstack? Okay, so a bit of a good. That helps. So you're in the right place. Jamstack is really this concept within modern web development. And the Jam sounds really fun. It stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. That's ultimately what we're talking about here. So think of the world that we're used to where you're building websites, you're building back-end applications or whatever it may be. Normally you need some kind of compute to host that because there's processing that needs to be done to serve up whatever rendered content to your users. The idea with Jamstack applications, static applications, is you pre-render them. So you build the contents ahead of time, and then that is what's rendered to your end users. So ultimately, I might write my website in YAML, for example, some kind of markdown, but my users actually see the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript, the images that get served up. So this is the idea behind these Jamstack applications. You may have heard Gatsby, Hugo, Next.js, Nuxt.js, Blazor. There's many, of course, different frameworks. We all know that as devs. There's tons of different frameworks these days. But there's a lot of benefits to this pattern as well. So because the content that we're talking about at this stage is all static, we can now host that in different places. So previously, if we had to go and render that content on the fly, we'd have to have some kind of server, some kind of compute which is serving. So virtual machines, Kubernetes clusters, whatever is the sexiest thing right now in technology. We'd have to have those backing the service. But the really great thing about this is all driven by modern principles. So think about DevOps, think about using storage and content delivery networks and being able to build global applications. These are all of the kind of patterns that you see typically coming out with static web apps. So now what I want to do is take us away from the development side and just look at a bit of cloud architecture from it. And there's a pattern on the Azure Architecture Center called the Static Content Hosting pattern. Put it in your favorite search engine, you will find it. Effectively, what this pattern means is I host my content typically in some kind of storage area. So think in Azure Storage, for example, AWS S3, GCP's storage, all those kind of storage providers. Host it there, serve up those assets. And that's great because those typical services are a lot cheaper than running compute. Storage is cheap, compute is pricey in comparison. So that's one of the great benefits of this pattern, is you can start rapidly optimizing the cost. It's not always a useful pattern. So if you think about those scenarios where you have a website, where actually it does need some dynamic content, maybe you need to change something on the fly as you serve it up to an end user, that might not be the best fit. And it's okay, you don't need to shoehorn it in, that is okay. But if it can work, even if you're offloading images, CSS, JavaScript away from your compute, so that you're not serving that up to your end users and serving it from a storage account, that's a great pattern. Because then it's starting to allow you to scale more effectively, because that compute isn't using that anymore. All following, all? Good, excellent. So, in which case then, we're going to jump straight into demo at this point, and to prevent any issues, I have pre-recorded, so we'll kind of click through it, and I'll talk through it as well.
Didn't trust the demo,
yeah, 20 minutes is not very long, and not very long, and Wi-Fi can be not reliable. So, here I am in the Azure portal. You can go this side because there's a glare. What I'm going to do first off is search for static web apps in the Azure portal. So static web apps is a resource that was launched in preview last year. It got generally available in build of this year, so May. And the idea behind it is to host those types of static websites that we were talking about. So you give it a name, you set a resource group, and there's two plan types. There's either free, we all love free, yes, excellent, or there's a standard tier. Now free with any Azure resource, if it's free, no SLA, but you do get a great number of benefits. So for example, we'll talk about staging environments a bit later. Custom domains you can get out of the box. If you're a hobbyist and you're hosting your personal site, for example, you don't need something big, you can go use that.
Just the SSL certificate says it's free.
Yes.
Using Let's Encrypt.
I believe it's using not Let's Encrypt.
The new one, there's a new one out, yeah. Sorry,
oh, it didn't? Oh,
sorry.
No.
I'll leave it to them.
No, you're okay. It's not Let's Encrypt, I think it's DigiCert that do it through, actually. Thanks for the catch.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And it looks like it's restarted, so we'll start again. Why not? If we can leave the questions after the video. No, it's just the screen is super small there. Yes, so you've got the free tier, you've got the standard tier as well. So my website, cloudwithchris.com, that I mentioned earlier, is hosted on Static Web Apps. I used to have it on Azure Storage and Azure CDN, now on Static Web Apps. So Static Web Apps is a globally available service. So when you go ahead and you deploy, that content of the front end is getting replicated. It's globally distributed. You'll see that in the docs. So even though you select a region here, for example, later, it's for certain components, but the content is distributed. You may want to still use a CDN or something in front if you're talking high scale content delivery network, but for most scenarios you should be okay. So you get your SSL certificates, we were talking, we'll see that in a little bit here. You've also got these staging environments, we'll take a look, and Azure Functions integrate into these static sites as well. So think about that scenario we mentioned about Jamstack, JavaScript, APIs and markup. The APIs component is the Azure Functions, so we've got that serverless backend now to go and drive those APIs. So I'm going to choose West Europe, again, for the Azure Functions API and the staging environments there, because the staging environments are not globally replicated, it's the production one that is. We'll go ahead and we've got a choice to use either GitHub or an other option. So when we say other, right now we mean Azure DevOps, but there's a lot of great integration with GitHub. So on the GitHub side, these staging environments that we'll be talking about are really driven by the GitHub actions that are available. So if the staging environments are something that you want to use, and we'll show those in a bit, then you'll probably want to go down the GitHub route here. So you can see all I'm doing is logging in, authorizing my account, so I go and click in that, and then I just go and select my organization or my profile. So this is the repository I want to use, this is the branch that I want to use. What's brilliant about this is I then choose what type of static website I'm actually building. So is it a Blazor, is it a Next, is it a Hugo? All of these different options that you have available. So then it's quite literally as simple as selecting that option, scrolling down, and you will see in a moment there that we can go ahead then and generate the DevOps pipeline just by creating that resource. So you can see right here, we've got this preview workflow file. I've got some things configuring for my specific app. And this is the GitHub repository for me. So it's already made. So we're going to go ahead, create this resource, and as a result, a workflow file will get created for us. So our DevOps pipeline gets created. We'll do the right thing. We'll go and add our resource tags because governance is important. And then we'll go and hit create. And it takes seconds, as you will see. It doesn't take very long at all to go and deploy this resource. Again, another benefit compared to compute, which can typically take a bit longer. So we jump back to the GitHub repo, and we can see when we refresh the page, we've now got a GitHub action triggered. Didn't have to do anything in terms of setting up pipelines or anything. It just deployed that automatically on my behalf. So you can see I've got two files in there. One was a previous one that I did. Here's the kind of live example, I suppose. And what we can do at this point is start digging into the static web app. So again, looks like most other Azure resources. It's global, we can see that there. I've got the free SKU as well, so again, no cost, brilliant, love that as a hobbyist. But actually there's a lot of value that comes from static web apps beyond what we've really talked about so far. Staging environments. I used to host my website in Azure Storage and Azure CDN. To make staging environments, I had to do a lot of the heavy lifting to spin those up dynamically. Instead, with static web apps, you can see here, this is my production site. It's got some data being pulled in from an Azure function, it's a Blazor app. But with static web apps, it's quite literally as simple as creating the pull request in GitHub, and then static web apps picks up on that and generates the staging environment for you. So you can see that just down here. And now we'll jump across to GitHub, and we'll see that actually we've got that pull request there. And embedded within are links to the staging environment then as well. So it's all nicely integrated and consistent. If not, we can jump back to Azure Resource, go and take a look, and you'll see when it loads up in a moment here, Hello South Coast Summit instead of Hello World. You know, great change to the application there. It did a lot of value for the day. But that's, again, just one aspect. There's so much more to static web apps. For example, we're now going to go and just kind of walk down through the list. Configuration. Application settings. If you think about the application settings that you need to configure, you can embed those within this kind of runtime view, so you can pull those into your application. A bit like app services, variables if you use those, or Kubernetes config maps if you use those, similar kind of idea. App Insights, again, can integrate nicely, typically with the Azure Functions side though. So the front end, you can wire up App Insights using JavaScript yourself. This is really talking about the back end Azure function. Custom domains. This is really cool. So custom domains, yes, you know, we all have our own personal domains and whatnot. But the free SSL certificate that we were talking about earlier, you don't have to do anything. Like, all you have to do is go ahead, get your domain name pointed to the correct CNAME record. So I had one pre-configured, ready to go, swa.cloudrequest.com. Go ahead, click next, click add, and then it's a case of it will go and configure that, and it will create the certificate on our behalf as well. We literally need to do zero. And this is the idea behind static web apps, is it's a very light touch, turnkey approach to doing a static site on Azure. You can absolutely do this using Azure Storage, CDN and others, but for the simplest way, Static Web Apps has a lot of it out of the box for you ready to go. And even the standard tier, I think, was like £7 a month or so, if I remember rightly. Of course, depends on how much traffic you're pushing out as well, and maybe extra bandwidth, but again, very, very cost effective as a solution compared to like app service or virtual machines or Kubernetes. Azure Functions. And you can see in here that we're generating some data in a table. What's actually generating that data is an Azure function, calling a backend Azure function. Now that Azure function is integrated inside the static web app. So the call that I'm making, if we just jump across in here, you can see that we've got our weather forecast function here. It's the normal Azure Functions code that we're used to. I think it was JavaScript, Python, .NET, and there was one more, top of my head I've forgotten, that is supported inside of static web apps. But you can see if you've written other Azure Functions before, looks no different, looks exactly the same, because it is. So all I'm going to do at this point is at the end, I'm going to add /API/weather forecast. I'm not calling out to a different domain, I'm not doing anything like that. It's exposed as a subfolder below that main static web app root. So it's really nice integration there as well. Role management. How many times have we had to go and integrate identity or something into the application? There's, again, built-in ways for you to go and integrate that into the application as well. Inviting your users, for example. Setting appropriate permissions on different paths, that kind of thing. Now you can see we're just going to go ahead and change it from the free tier to standard. We've now got a couple of options available. Identity, so managed identity, if we want to go and call our Azure resources without connection strings or passwords, and private endpoints. So maybe we've got an internal corporate app that actually we don't want to expose to the public internet. That one is in preview right now, but you know, that is the direction of travel for that. Now I just want to show you, this is actually my static website, my cloudwithchris.com. And you can see here that we've got these three domains. I've got my Apex domain, my naked domain, or my www. And there's a nice little thing in here as well where you set a default domain. So if someone does try and go to one of those other domains, it will redirect you to the other domain as well. So if we take a look at that grey beach, you can see there, it's gone ahead, navigated me to my www domain. So again, it just makes this creation process of static web apps really nice, really easy and simple and intuitive to understand. All possible with Azure Storage, Azure CDN, and again, uses the same kind of patterns that we've talked about here, but this is a much simpler way of being able to build. So, just to recap again, if you do want to go ahead and learn more, what this will take you to is a page with a few links on it. One of them is my blog, so if you want to go check that out, please do.
Shameless plug.
Of course, already done. I do write a lot about this stuff actually, so again, if it's of interest. The other link is to a Microsoft learning path as well, and there's a whole learning path exploring all of this in more detail. We've really only skimmed the surface in 20 minutes, but
I just didn't realise it existed.
And that's exactly why. That's exactly why I named the talk title like it does, because it's such a great service.
It's amazing. It's got everything that you need to develop quite complicated single-page applications. So.
Yeah, and like I said, I used Azure Storage and Azure CDN to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
In the storage here, I know on the left-hand side there's the
static sites, exactly.
The old version.
That's and it's still a completely valid option. Like I only changed because there were things in here that made my life easier. Like if I had to and I wasn't getting any value from this, I'd probably still stay in the same place. So both options are still completely valid.
Yeah.
It's just this way is more of a turnkey kind of, well, there you go, it's done. Yeah.
I just spooled on it now.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool.
Any other questions, folks?
Fantastic, thank you.
No, not
I've
really.
got a slide set up, Mike, but I really struggle to get the apex domain pointing now. Have you got any tips or resources in pointing the right direction?
Yeah, I think there are some challenges with that still, because I noticed mine
noticed
the other
you've got
day.
it.
I
Yeah.
noticed mine the other day. I don't think it actually redirected.
Okay.
I haven't had a chance to dig into it yet, but I did somehow get it managed to point to it. I think that was the original problem. But we can take a look outside if you like.
Yeah.
Because what I was going to say is the Microsoft stands outside. That's where I'll be kind of based anyway. So if you want to come along and ask any questions or look at anything, please do.
Well.
Yeah, we can take a look at that.
Okay, thanks.
So, thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah.